Druid is one of those games where unless someone explains to you what's going on in it, you're going to have a really bad time. And if someone does explain to you what's going on in it, well, you still might not have a good time, but you got a much better chance at that. Druid Kyoufu no Tobira is a port of a computer game. It's one of those games that was a pretty big deal in Europe in the mid-80s, and since then it's been all but forgotten. When they ported it to the disk system, they gave it that spiffy subtitle. The level layout and placement of items was tweaked to be quite a bit friendlier, and a new system of permanent power-ups was added, or powered downs in some cases. The plot of the game is that there's 4 demon princes and they've got a castle and you're a friendly druid, so you do the needful. The game progresses through 8 maps, and on the maps that have a demon prince, you'll have to destroy them before you move on, otherwise you get sent back a floor. As a druid, your primary method for dealing with things is by wild shaping into a bear and then outdamaging any fighter in the party while simultaneously casting spells. Unfortunately, the druid in this game doesn't really seem to have an optimal build, so you'll just have to cast the spells that you're given. You have 3 offensive spells, water, fire, and lightning, and then there are 4 utility spells, Ki, Eknelis, Golem, and Chaos. Pressing the A button shoots your attack spell, which always goes in a straight line in front of you, while pressing the B button casts your utility spell. You change what spell you're using by pressing Start to pause the game, and then hitting A and B to rotate through the selection at the bottom of the screen. You can't pause the game while you're under attack though, and that can be a real problem when you have to rotate your spell to deal with the threat. All of these spells have limited uses, and you start with 50 of each attack spell, 1 Eknelis and 1 Chaos. You get more spells by collecting treasure chests that are scattered everywhere, and when you run into one of those, you'll be given your choice of a spell and quantity to take. Attack spells always appear on the first screen, so if you scroll down and hit the A button, you'll see any utility spells on the second screen. After you've taken the spells, you might find treasure, and the treasures in Druid are pretty weird. Half of them power up your character, and half of them weaken the character. Why would you take something that would harm you? Well, Druid has multiple endings, and if you play with something that hurts you, it boosts what ending you get. The benefits are things like decreasing damage that you take, or increasing the duration of your utility spells. The harmful artifacts are things like disabling your ability to attack at random, freezing you in place at random, and making you take damage anytime you shoot. You don't have to take a treasure, you can press B to cancel out of that screen. And you can always hit left and right while you're selecting the treasures to pick one of the treasures you currently have, and exchange what you've got for what's in the box. There are 6 inventory slots for these artifacts, plus 1 special slot that's used solely for damage effects. When it comes to selecting one of the 3 attack spells, the key difference is in how they affect the monsters you're fighting. Generally speaking, the undead take extra damage from water, so ghosts and skeletons, while living creatures take damage from fire, that would include the slimes and beetles, and lightning does extra damage to certain very difficult enemies that appear late in the game. Defeating an enemy fills up your destroy bar, and when that maxes out, you recover health. The other way you recover health is to locate a pentagram and stand on it for a little while. That just causes your health to shoot up. For the utility spells, Ki is used to open doors that block your way. That makes it the most important spell to collect. Not only do doors block your way to additional chests, one of which will inevitably have a key in it, ensuring that you profit from opening the door, there's also plenty of doors blocking the way that you have to go. That means if you're not taking keys, you could easily find yourself stuck. The Eknelis spell is not silence, nor is it loud as you might expect from silence being spelled backwards. Instead, it's invisibility, which is what it was called in the original computer game, but they changed the name here for some reason. Invisibility doesn't prevent you from taking damage, it just stops the monsters from chasing you. That makes it handy, but you could easily complete the game without ever touching it. Golem is the big spell in the game, big enough that the Golem is on the title screen and in all of the endings. Golem summons a monster that can fight for you, but mainly it's going to wind up getting in your way. You hit select to rotate through commands for the Golem, and by default it just follows you. Unfortunately, it blocks your shots, so you can't really deal with anything coming up from behind you in that case. If you want the golem to dish out damage and not take damage itself in return, then you want to switch it to attack. And that's helpful, but in attack mode, the golem will walk directly toward the nearest enemy, and that will often get it stuck on terrain away from you. Then there's wait, which will just have the golem stand in one place. And between those three, if you want to use the golem effectively, you're going to have to do a lot of micromanaging of it. However, there is another mode for the golem, and that's 2-player. The real way you're supposed to use the golem is to have your friend play, and then when they're controlling the golem and running around and smashing stuff, hitting the B button will do a running charge that will destroy any enemies in its path. Then it will reappear close to you after the charge is over. So the golem isn't especially useful if you're playing by yourself, but if you've got a friend, it's great. And finally, there's Chaos. This spell destroys all enemies on the screen, but to do that, it causes a really severe flashing effect. Chaos is also the only spell that can defeat the demon princes, but it only works if you run right up to them and cast it in their face. So you'll need Chaos to beat the game, but you'll only need 4 castings of it. Something that you might have noticed about the damage in this game is that there's really no invincibility after you get hurt. Your life just melts away when an enemy parks on top of you. And since you can't necessarily change to an effective spell when that happens, you can lose a lot of health very quickly. If you die, you can continue from exactly where you were, but you can only do this 3 times. After that, it's back to the start of the game. Which could be worse. Druid is a fairly short game, but it's definitely not fun when it happens. Druid is one of those games that is totally forgotten in Japan. It's practically wiped from existence. And I actually think that's kind of a shame. Okay, I don't think Druid's fantastic, and I probably won't go back to play it anytime soon. But it is a perfectly adequate action game here. And you'd think people would have a lot of fun trying to route out options to get the best endings, which treasure chests to get, and which items to take. So even though this is a pretty short game, it is a game where there's plenty to do. Druid is a game that hides a lot of its tools though. You've really got to play it a while to understand it, and then figure out if it's something that you enjoy. This isn't the kind of game where you can just pop it in, hit start, and you're off to the races. So even though Druid didn't fully work for me, I can see how other people could find a lot to enjoy in it.